Welcome to Lesson 5 of Vocabulary. Our first vocabulary word is ante. It's Latin for before or in front of. Antediluvian. Ante is before, diluvian is flood. So antediluvian is a word describing something that is very old or outdated, literally meant before the flood. That is, the flood described in the Bible. Your first vocabulary word related to ante is antechamber, and it's a noun, and it describes the outer room that leads to another and is often used as a waiting room. Nowadays, we would call this a lobby. Some of the older churches have very elegant antechambers before you go into the sanctuary. Sanctuary. Antedate is our second word. It's a verb. It means to date something with a date earlier than that of actual writing, or to proceed in time. 2 years ago, I traveled in the South, and I visited southern plantations that antedated the Civil War, which means those plantations were there before the time of the Civil War. Antemeridium is our third word, and it's an adjective, and it describes before noon. So on the sundial, the point when the sun was the highest, the dial is pointing straight up. That's our 12 o'clock. That's the meridian. So anything that's ante-meridian is before that point. So it's morning. Anything after that is post-meridian. So you come to school ante-meridian. You go home from school post-meridian. And our last vocabulary word for ante is anterior. It's an adjective, and it describes something located before or toward the front or head, or coming before in time or development. So I could say, if a person fell down and scratched the front of the anterior of the forehead, that means if somebody was in a car crash and they had a wound to their anterior person, it would mean that that wound was toward the head. If you have the privilege to travel first class, you sit at in the anterior section of the plane. You sit in the anterior section of the plane. Our second root word for this week is demo, which comes from the Greek word meaning people. A demagogue leads the people, usually into trouble by lying and appealing to their prejudices. Demographics is an adjective, and it has to do with the study of human populations, especially their size, growth, density, and patterns of living. 2 or 3 years ago, the U.S. government completed a demographic study of the United States, in which they sent surveys to every home. And on that survey, we had to answer how many people lived there, how old they were, what their occupation was, if they were a student, so forth and so on. That was a demographic study. Endemic is an adjective, and it means found only in a given place or region, often found in given occupation, area, or environment. So we could say that malaria is a disease that is endemic to tropical regions around the world. Malaria could be said to be an endemic disease in the tropical regions. Malaria could be said to be a disease that is endemic in the tropical regions around the world. Pandemic is a noun. It's widespread and affecting a large portion of people. We could consider the worldwide AIDS pandemic as one of the most deadly events in human history. There was also a pandemic of swine flu in the early 1800s that killed an extraordinary amount of people. But pandemic is widespread and affecting a large portion of people. Your last word for demo is demotic. It's an adjective. It means popular or common. So the most demotic color worn at Edison is probably black, and those who wear it tend to blend into the crowd. So these two root words, ante and demo, are the words that we're dealing with this week.